The door swung open with a creak that echoed through the empty house, and Samuel Thorne froze in the doorway, his hand still on the knob, staring at the dining table where 4 plates sat arranged as though expecting guests he had never invited. He lived alone. He had always lived alone since buying this modest ranch house 3 miles outside Genoa, Nevada, back in 1878. Now, 2 years later in the autumn of 1880, he had grown accustomed to the silence, the dust that settled on unused furniture, the single tin cup beside his wash basin. Samuel was 32 years old, weathered by sun and hard work, with dark hair that fell past his collar and eyes the color of storm clouds. He had spent the last 6 weeks driving cattle north to Carson City with a crew of hired hands, sleeping under stars and eating beans from a can. Coming home meant solitude, rest, and the familiar emptiness of a house that held only ghosts of what might have been. But 4 plates gleamed in the lamplight he had just lit, white porcelain he did not own, arranged with silverware he had never purchased. A pot sat on the stove, still warm to the touch when he approached it cautiously, his hand instinctively moving to the revolver at his hip before he stopped himself. This was not the work of thieves or drifters. The house was clean, cleaner than he had left it, with fresh curtains hanging in the windows and the smell of bread lingering in the air. Samuel walked through each room, his boots echoing on floorboards that had been swept and polished. His bedroom was untouched, but the spare room at the end of the hall now contained a neatly made bed with a quilt he had never seen, patterns of blue and yellow forming stars across the fabric. On the small table beside it sat a leather-bound book, and when he opened it, he found pages filled with careful handwriting. A journal, a woman's journal. His heart hammered as he read the first entry dated 3 weeks prior. September 15, 1880. I have made my decision. Samuel Thorne does not know me, but I know him, and I know he is a good man. My brother James spoke of him often before the fever took him last spring. James said Samuel was honest, hardworking, and kind to those who had nothing to offer in return. James said if anything ever happened, I should come here to Genoa and find Samuel. I have nowhere else to go. My parents are gone, my brother is gone, and the man I was promised to in Sacramento proved himself a drunk and a brute. I broke that engagement and used the last of my money to come here. I arrived 2 days ago and found this house empty, so I let myself in through the unlocked back window. I hope Samuel will forgive the intrusion. I have been cleaning and cooking, trying to make myself useful, trying to prove I am worth keeping. I set 4 plates at the table tonight, imagining the family we might have someday if he will have me. I know it is forward. I know it is bold beyond reason. But I have learned that waiting for life to happen means watching it pass you by. I am Kate Ashford, and I have decided Samuel Thorne will be my husband if he will have me. Samuel read the passage 3 times, his mind reeling. James Holbrook. He remembered James, a young ranch hand who had worked for him the previous year, eager and honest, who had died of scarlet fever in the spring. James had mentioned a sister back east, but Samuel had never imagined she would come here, never imagined this. He heard the sound then, soft footsteps on the porch, and he turned as the front door opened. The woman who entered was perhaps 24 or 25, with auburn hair pinned up beneath a simple bonnet and green eyes that widened when she saw him standing in the hallway. She wore a plain traveling dress of dark green wool, dusty from the road, and carried a basket filled with vegetables. For a moment, they simply stared at each other. "You are home early," she said finally, her voice steady despite the color rising in her cheeks. "I expected you tomorrow at the earliest." "This is my house," Samuel said, the words coming out more harshly than he intended. he softened his tone. "You are James Holbrook's sister. I am Kate Ashford. James was my half-brother, same mother, different fathers. And yes, this is your house, and I have trespassed, and you have every right to send me away." She set the basket down on the table beside the 4 plates, her movements deliberate and calm despite the tremor in her hands. "But I am asking you not to. I am asking you to hear me out." Samuel removed his hat, running a hand through his hair. "I read your journal, the one you left in the spare room." Kate's eyes flickered with something between embarrassment and defiance. "I expected you would. I left it there so you would understand without me having to explain face to face. I am not a woman who waits for things to be decided for her anymore. You set 4 plates." "I did." "Why 4? Kate moved to the stove, lifting the lid on the pot to stir whatever was inside. The aroma of beef stew filled the kitchen, rich and savory, and Samuel's stomach reminded him he had not eaten a proper meal in days. "2 for us," Kate said, "and 2 for the children I hope we will have. I am imagining a future, Mr. Thorne. I am claiming it before it slips away." Samuel leaned against the doorframe, studying her. She was pretty in an understated way, with freckles across her nose and capable hands that moved with confidence as she worked. There was no artifice in her manner, no coy glances or practiced smiles. She was direct, almost painfully so, and something about that honesty struck him as more precious than gold. "You do not know me," he said. "I know what James told me. I know you paid for his doctor when he fell ill, even though he had only worked for you a few months. I know you gave him a proper burial when he died and wrote to me yourself to tell me what happened. Your letter was kind. It mattered." Kate turned to face him fully. "I know you are a man who lives alone but keeps his house clean enough. I know you do not drink to excess because there are no bottles here. I know you read because there are books on your shelf, and you care for your horse because the stable is well maintained. I know enough. And if I am not the man you have imagined, then I will have been wrong and I will leave." Kate lifted her chin. "But I do not think I am wrong." Samuel was silent for a long moment, listening to the bubble of stew and the creak of the house settling. Outside, the Nevada wind whispered through the cottonwoods, and the last light of sunset painted the sky in shades of amber and rose. He thought of the empty years, the loneliness he had accepted as his portion, the quiet conviction that love was for other men, men who knew how to speak sweetly and court properly. "I am not good with words," he said finally. "I do not know how to do this, how to court a woman or make her feel welcome." "Then it is fortunate I am doing this for both of us," Kate said, and the smallest smile touched her lips. "All I ask is that you give me a chance. Let me stay for a week. Let me cook and clean and prove I can be useful. Let us talk and see if we suit each other. At the end of the week, if you want me to go, I will go, and I will not hold it against you." Samuel considered. Every practical bone in his body said this was madness, that you could not build a life with a stranger, that love took time and careful cultivation. But there was something in Kate's eyes, a fierce determination mixed with vulnerability, that called to something deep in his chest. She was brave. She had crossed half the country alone, broken an engagement, claimed a future that did not yet exist. That kind of courage deserved at least a chance. "1 week," he said. "And you take the spare room with a lock on the door. I will not have you uncomfortable." "The door already has a lock," Kate said. "I checked." Despite himself, Samuel felt a smile tug at his mouth. "Of course you did." They ate dinner together that night at the table with 4 plates, leaving 2 empty as monuments to hope. Kate's stew was excellent, thick with tender meat and vegetables, seasoned with herbs Samuel did not keep in his sparse kitchen. She must have brought them with her or foraged them from the hillsides. As they ate, She told him about her journey from Sacramento, about the stagecoach that broke an axle outside of Placerville, about the old Chinese couple who had given her shelter for a night and refused payment. She spoke of her brother with fondness and grief, describing how James had always dreamed of the West, of wide open spaces and the freedom to build something of his own. "He wrote to me constantly," Kate said, her fork pausing over her plate. "His letters made me want to see this place, to understand what called to him so strongly. When he died, I felt like I had lost my only connection to this life he loved. Coming here was a way of keeping him close, I suppose, and when I read your letter, something in it made me feel less alone." Samuel remembered writing that letter, struggling over each word, trying to convey respect for a young man he had barely known but genuinely liked. James was a good worker. He had a way with the horses. They trusted him. "He always loved animals more than people," Kate said softly. "People disappointed him. Animals never did." "I understand that." Kate looked up, meeting his eyes across the table. "Do you? I had wondered. You live alone out here, far enough from town that visitors must be rare. James said you were a man who preferred solitude." "I prefer honesty," Samuel corrected. "And animals are honest. They do not lie or pretend. They are what they are, and people lie." "In my experience, yes." Kate set down her fork and folded her hands in her lap. "Then I will make you a promise, Samuel Thorne. I will never lie to you. I will be honest to the point of rudeness if necessary, and you will always know where you stand with me. In return, I ask the same from you. That is a fair bargain. Do we have a deal then?" Samuel extended his hand across the table, and after a moment, Kate placed her smaller hand in his. Her skin was warm, calloused from work, and her grip was firm. They shook once solemnly, and something settled in the air between them, an agreement that felt more binding than signatures on paper. The week that followed passed in a strange, tentative rhythm. Samuel rose before dawn as always, tending to his horses and the small herd of cattle he kept for personal use. Kate was always awake when he came in for breakfast, with coffee brewing and food on the table. She had a talent for making much from little, transforming his meager supplies into meals that actually tasted like something worth sitting down for. During the day, while he worked, she attacked the house with ferocious energy, scrubbing floors, beating rugs, organizing shelves that had devolved into chaos. She found a vegetable garden behind the house that had gone to weeds and spent 2 days clearing it, preparing it for spring planting. In the evenings, they talked. Samuel was not naturally talkative, but Kate had a way of asking questions that made him want to answer. She asked about his work, about the land, about how he had come to Nevada. He told her about growing up in Missouri, about losing his parents to cholera when he was 19, about drifting west with nothing but a horse and a bedroll. He had worked ranches from Kansas to California, saving every penny, until he had enough to buy this small piece of land and build something of his own. It was not much, but it was his, earned through sweat and stubbornness. Kate shared her own story in pieces. Her mother had died when she was 16, and her father, James's stepfather, had remarried quickly to a woman who made it clear Kate was not welcome. The engagement to the man in Sacramento had been arranged by her father, a way of passing her off to someone else's care. She had tried to make it work, had genuinely tried, until the night her intended came home drunk and violent. She had left that same night with the clothes on her back and the small inheritance her mother had left her. "I thought about going back east," she said one evening as they sat on the porch watching the stars emerge. "I have a cousin in Philadelphia who might have taken me in, but I did not want to be taken in. I did not want to be someone's burden or charity case. I wanted to choose my own life." "So you chose this?" Samuel gestured to the dark landscape, the distant mountains barely visible against the night sky. A ranch in Nevada with a man you have never met. I chose possibility, Kate corrected. I chose hope. That is different. Samuel was quiet, turning her words over in his mind. He had forgotten about hope somewhere along the way, had settled for survival and stability. But sitting here with Kate, listening to her voice in the darkness, he felt something stir in his chest that might have been hope waking up after a long sleep. On the 5th day, Samuel took Kate into Genoa. The town was small, barely more than a collection of buildings clustered around the main road, but it was lively with the commerce of ranchers and travelers passing through. Samuel needed supplies, and Kate had insisted on coming along, eager to see the place James had described in his letters. They took Samuel's wagon, and Kate sat beside him on the bench seat, her bonnet shading her face from the autumn sun. At the general store, the proprietor, a nosy man named Douglas Whitman, raised his eyebrows when Samuel walked in with Kate at his side. "Samuel Thorne, I had heard you were back from the cattle drive. And who is this lovely lady, Kate Ashford?" Kate said before Samuel could answer, extending her hand. "I am James Holbrook's sister. Perhaps you knew him." Whitman's expression shifted to sympathy. "I did indeed. Terrible thing, him passing so young. My condolences, Miss Ashford." "Thank you. I have come to stay with Mr. Thorne for a time." The way she said it, so matter-of-fact, left no room for improper speculation, but Samuel could see Whitman's mind working. News traveled fast in small towns, and by evening, everyone would know that Samuel Thorne had a woman living in his house. Kate seemed unconcerned, moving through the store with a list she had written, selecting flour and sugar and other staples with a practiced eye. As they loaded the supplies into the wagon, a woman approached them, older, perhaps 50, with graying hair and a kind face. "Excuse me, are you Samuel Thorne?" "I am. I am Martha Henderson. My husband and I have the ranch 5 miles south of yours. I heard through the grapevine that James Holbrook's sister had come to town, and I wanted to introduce myself." She turned to Kate with a warm smile. "You must be Kate. I am so sorry about your brother. He came to our place once to help with a difficult foaling, and he saved both the mare and her colt. We were grateful." Kate's face softened. "Thank you for telling me that. I love hearing stories about him." Martha glanced between them, her expression thoughtful. "If you are staying in the area, you should come to the church social next Saturday. The whole community gathers, and it is a good way to meet people. You would both be welcome." Samuel started to decline automatically, but Kate spoke first. "We would love to come. Thank you for the invitation, Mrs. Henderson." After Martha left, Samuel gave Kate a questioning look. "I do not usually attend social gatherings." "I know. But I do, and if I am going to be part of this community, I need to meet people. And you need to let them see us together so there are no ugly rumors." Samuel could not argue with her logic, though the thought of a social gathering made him uncomfortable. He was not a man who enjoyed small talk or crowds, but Kate was right. If she stayed, and he was increasingly certain he wanted her to stay, then they needed to be seen as respectable. That evening, as the week drew toward its close, Samuel found himself dreading the conversation they would need to have. Kate had kept her part of the bargain. She had proven herself useful, pleasant, and genuine. But had he proven himself to her? He was not charming or eloquent. He could offer her a simple life of hard work and isolation. Was that enough? Kate seemed to sense his unease. After dinner, she sat across from him at the table, her hands wrapped around a cup of tea, and said, "Tomorrow is the 7th day, I know. Have you decided?" Samuel met her eyes, those green eyes that had become familiar over the past week, and he realized he could not imagine the house without her now. The silence he had once valued felt oppressive compared to the sound of her voice, her footsteps, her presence. "I want you to stay, if you want to stay." Kate's expression did not change, but he saw the tension leave her shoulders. "I want to stay. Then we should talk about how this works. I will not pretend to be modern in my thinking. If you stay, I want to marry you properly. I will not have people questioning your reputation." "I agree." Samuel blinked, surprised by her quick acceptance. "You do, of course. I did not come here to be your housekeeper, Samuel. I came here to be your wife. I thought I made that clear." "You did. I just did not want to assume." Kate reached across the table, placing her hand over his. Her touch was warm, grounding. "Then let us not assume anything. Let us say it plainly. I want to marry you. I think we can build a good life together. I think we can grow to love each other, maybe even have already started. Do you agree?" Samuel turned his hand over, lacing his fingers through hers. "I agree. I think I started falling in love with you when I read your journal and realized you were brave enough to bet on a stranger." Kate's smile was radiant. "And I think I started falling in love with you when you did not throw me out the first night. You gave me a chance when you did not have to. So we are agreed. We will marry. We are agreed." They sat there holding hands across the table, the two empty plates still sitting between them like promises waiting to be fulfilled. Samuel had never believed in love at first sight or fate or any of the romantic notions people talked about. But sitting here with Kate, he believed in choice. She had chosen him, and he was choosing her, and maybe that was more powerful than any lightning bolt or destiny. The next week was a flurry of activity. Samuel rode into Genoa and spoke with the circuit preacher, a Methodist minister named Reverend Talbot, who traveled between the small towns of the territory. Talbot agreed to perform the ceremony the following Saturday, the same day as the church social, turning the community gathering into a wedding celebration. Kate threw herself into preparations with the same fierce energy she brought to everything. Sewing a new dress from fabric she purchased in town, baking cakes, and writing invitations on small pieces of paper that Samuel delivered to their neighbors. The ranch community around Genoa was small and close-knit, and the news of Samuel Thorne's unexpected wedding spread quickly. Neighbors Samuel barely knew stopped by to offer congratulations and gifts, practical things like preserves and tools and a beautiful handmade quilt from Martha Henderson. Kate received each visitor with grace, making tea and serving cake, slowly building connections that Samuel had never bothered to cultivate. He watched her work, marveling at her ease with people, the way she remembered names and asked about children and livestock and harvests. "You are good at this," he said one evening after a particularly long visit from the Hendersons and their 3 daughters. "At what? People. Community. I have lived here 2 years and barely know my neighbors. You have been here 2 weeks and have made more friends than I have in my entire life." Kate smiled, washing dishes at the basin. "People need connection, Samuel. You have been alone so long you forgot that, but you are not alone anymore." The simple truth of her words settled over him like a warm blanket. He was not alone anymore. The realization was both terrifying and exhilarating. Saturday arrived with clear skies and unseasonably warm weather for late September. Samuel dressed in his best clothes, a black suit he had purchased years ago and rarely wore, and brushed his hat until it looked almost new. Kate emerged from the spare room in a dress of pale blue cotton, simple but beautiful, with her auburn hair arranged in curls that framed her face. She carried a bouquet of wildflowers she had gathered that morning, golden rabbit brush and purple asters that grew along the creek. "You look beautiful," Samuel said, the words coming out rough with emotion. Kate's eyes shone. "You look very handsome yourself." They rode into Genoa together, the wagon decorated with ribbons that Martha Henderson had brought by the previous day. The church, a small white building with a simple steeple, was already filled with people when they arrived. Samuel recognized most of the faces, neighbors and townsfolk who had come out to witness this unexpected union. He felt Kate's hand slip into his as they walked up the aisle, and he squeezed gently, trying to convey reassurance. Reverend Talbot was a thin man with wire-rimmed spectacles and a kind smile. He had spoken with both of them earlier in the week, asking about their intentions and their faith, and seemed satisfied that they were entering marriage with honest hearts. The ceremony was simple and brief, traditional vows spoken in steady voices. When Talbot pronounced them husband and wife, Samuel leaned down and kissed Kate for the first time, a chaste press of lips that nevertheless sent warmth flooding through his entire body. The congregation applauded, and they turned to face their community as Mr. and Mrs. Thorne. Kate was glowing, her hand tight in Samuel's, and he felt something in his chest expand, making it hard to breathe. He had been alone for so long, and now he was part of something bigger, something that included this woman and these people, and a future that stretched out before them full of possibility. The social that followed was held in the churchyard, with tables laden with food and a fiddler playing lively tunes. Children ran between the adults, laughing and playing games, and couples danced on a cleared patch of ground. Samuel was not much for dancing, but Kate coaxed him into trying, and they moved through a simple waltz while their neighbors clapped and cheered. She was light in his arms, following his lead with easy grace, and when she laughed at his clumsy footwork, the sound was pure joy. As the afternoon wore on, Samuel found himself in conversation with Martha Henderson's husband, Robert, a gruff man with calloused hands and a face weathered by years of outdoor work. "You are a lucky man, Samuel," Robert said, watching Kate where she stood with a group of women. "That girl has spirit. She will keep your life interesting. I am beginning to realize that. Martha and I have been married 30 years come November. Best decision I ever made, even when she drives me to distraction. Having a good woman beside you makes all the difference." Robert clapped Samuel on the shoulder. "You need anything, you send word. We look after our own out here." Samuel nodded, feeling the weight of community settling around him like a warm coat. He had been self-sufficient for so long, priding himself on needing no one. But there was comfort in knowing he was not alone, that there were people who would help if he needed it. As the sun began to set, Samuel and Kate said their goodbyes and climbed back into the wagon for the ride home. Kate leaned against his shoulder, her head resting there comfortably, and Samuel guided the horses with one hand, his other arm around his wife. His wife. The word still felt strange, but it was a good strangeness, full of promise. When they reached the house, Samuel helped Kate down from the wagon and then, on impulse, swept her up into his arms. She laughed, surprised, her arms going around his neck. "What are you doing, carrying you over the threshold? It is tradition, is it not?" "I did not think you cared about tradition. I am learning." Samuel carried her through the doorway and into the house that was now truly their home. He set her down gently in the front room, and they stood there in the fading light, looking at each other with new awareness. They were married now. This was real. Kate reached up and touched his face, her fingers tracing the line of his jaw. "I am glad I chose you, Samuel Thorne. I am glad you did too." Samuel covered her hand with his, turning his head to kiss her palm. "I know this has all happened fast, and we still have much to learn about each other, but I promise I will do my best to be a good husband to you. And I promise to be a good wife. We will figure it out together." They spent that evening sitting by the fireplace, talking quietly about their hopes and plans. Kate wanted to expand the vegetable garden in the spring, maybe get some chickens for eggs and meat. Samuel talked about building a proper barn to replace the small stable, about possibly increasing his herd if the winter was mild, and the cattle market held steady. They were practical dreams, rooted in the hard realities of ranch life, but they were shared dreams now, and that made all the difference. When they finally retired to bed, Kate took Samuel's hand and led him to the spare room that had been hers. She had moved her things into his room that morning, claiming the space as theirs. The bed was made with the star quilt, and lamplight flickered on the walls, casting dancing shadows. Samuel felt nervous suddenly, aware that this was another threshold they were crossing. Kate seemed to sense his uncertainty. She stepped close, rising on her toes to kiss him softly. "We do not have to rush anything. We have all the time in the world." But Samuel found he did not want to wait. He pulled her close, kissing her with a depth of feeling that surprised them both, and Kate responded with equal fervor. They came together with tenderness and passion, discovering each other in the lamplight, learning the language of touch and breath and shared pleasure. It was awkward at times, as first times often are, but it was also beautiful, a physical expression of the emotional bond they were building. Afterward, they lay tangled together in the bed, Kate's head on Samuel's chest, his arm around her shoulders. He could feel her heartbeat gradually slowing, matching his, and he marveled at how natural this felt, how right. "I never thought I would have this," he said into the darkness. "A wife, a home that felt complete. I had convinced myself I did not need it." Kate's fingers traced patterns on his chest. "Everyone needs connection, Samuel. You just had not met the right person yet. And you are the right person. I am absolutely the right person." There was laughter in her voice, but also conviction. "We chose each other, and we will make this work. I believe that with everything in me." Samuel kissed the top of her head, breathing in the scent of her hair, herbs and sunshine. "I believe it too." The autumn turned to winter, and Samuel and Kate settled into married life with surprising ease. They worked side by side, preparing the ranch for the cold months ahead. Samuel taught Kate to ride, and she proved a quick learner, soon able to help him check on the cattle scattered across his grazing land. She was fearless on horseback, laughing with delight when they galloped across the open range, her hair streaming behind her in turn. Kate taught Samuel to cook beyond basic survival meals. She showed him how to make bread, how to season meat properly, how to preserve fruits and vegetables for winter. They worked in the kitchen together in the evenings, their movements becoming synchronized, a domestic dance that brought unexpected joy. Samuel had always seen cooking as a necessary chore, but with Kate, it became something else, a shared activity that filled the house with warmth and good smells. The first real snow came in early December, covering the valley in white. Samuel woke to find Kate standing at the bedroom window, watching the flakes fall. "It is beautiful," she said when she noticed he was awake. "I have never seen snow quite like this. Wait until we have 6 feet of it and the cattle need feeding twice a day. You might feel differently." Kate turned to him with a grin. "I doubt it. I am a woman who chose to live on a Nevada ranch, remember? I am prepared for hard work." She proved it over the weeks that followed. Winter on a ranch was relentless, with animals to care for and equipment to maintain and constant vigilance required. Kate never complained, even when the cold made her fingers stiff or the wind cut through her layers of clothing. She fed the chickens they had purchased in November, collected eggs in the morning, and helped Samuel break ice on the water troughs. At night, they huddled together under quilts, sharing body heat and stories, building a shared history one day at a time. Christmas came, and they celebrated quietly with just the two of them. Samuel gave Kate a set of silver hair combs he had ordered from a catalog, and her face lit up with such delight that he felt like he had given her diamonds. Kate presented him with a new leather belt she had tooled herself, working on it in secret during the afternoons while he was out with the cattle. The design was intricate, a pattern of horses and mountains that must have taken hours to create. "When did you learn to do this?" Samuel asked, running his fingers over the detailed work. "James taught me when I was young. He learned from a saddle maker in Sacramento. I thought you might like something practical that was also personal." Samuel pulled her into his arms, overcome with gratitude for this woman who had bulldozed her way into his life and filled it with light. "I love it. I love you." The words slipped out naturally, and Kate pulled back to look at him, her eyes wide. "Say that again." "I love you, Kate Thorne." Her smile was brilliant. "I love you too, Samuel. I have loved you for weeks but did not want to say it first." "Why not?" "Because you needed to come to it on your own. I pushed my way into your life. I wanted you to choose to love me." Samuel cupped her face in his hands. "I choose you. Every day I choose you." They made love in front of the fireplace that night, the Christmas candles burning down to stubs, and Samuel felt a contentment so profound it was almost painful. He had been alone for so long, armored against disappointment, and now those walls had crumbled completely. He was vulnerable in a way he had never been before, his heart exposed, but he would not have changed it for anything. Winter eventually gave way to spring, and the valley transformed into a carpet of wildflowers. Kate threw herself into the garden with ferocious energy, planting vegetables and herbs, creating rows that stretched across the cleared ground behind the house. Samuel watched her work, marveling at her determination, the way she attacked every task as though she could bend the world to her will through sheer force of effort. In April, Kate began feeling unwell in the mornings, and after a week of this, she rode into Genoa to see Dr. Patterson, an elderly man who served the community's medical needs. Samuel wanted to go with her, but she insisted he stay to work on the fence line that needed repair. When she returned that afternoon, her eyes were shining. "I am pregnant," she said without preamble, standing in the doorway of the barn where Samuel was working. "Dr. Patterson says the baby will come in late October or early November." Samuel dropped the hammer he was holding. For a moment he could not speak, could not process what she had just said. "A baby, they were going to have a baby." "Are you certain?" "Yes, I suspected, but I wanted to be sure before I told you." Kate moved closer, taking his hands in hers. "Are you happy?" "Happy." Samuel felt like his chest might burst open. "Kate, I am beyond happy. I am terrified and thrilled and completely overwhelmed. We are going to be parents." Kate laughed, throwing her arms around his neck. "We are, and I know we will be good at it because we are good at everything we do together." The next months passed in a blur of preparation. Samuel built a cradle in the evenings, working the wood with careful precision, determined to make something beautiful for his child. Kate sewed tiny clothes and blankets, her hands constantly busy. They argued good-naturedly about names, compiling lists that grew longer and less serious as the pregnancy progressed. As summer arrived, Kate's belly swelled with new life, and Samuel found himself talking to the unborn child, telling stories about the ranch, about their plans for the future. Kate would laugh at him, but her eyes were always soft when she watched him do it. They attended church socials and community gatherings, and the neighbors watched Kate's pregnancy with protective interest. Martha Henderson checked in regularly, bringing advice and hand-me-down baby items from her own children, now grown. In late October, as the aspens turned gold on the mountainsides, Kate went into labor. Samuel rode frantically to fetch Dr. Patterson, his heart in his throat, praying that everything would go smoothly. The doctor arrived within the hour, calm and professional, and sent Samuel out of the room with instructions to boil water and keep busy. Samuel paced the front room, listening to Kate's cries from the bedroom, feeling utterly helpless and terrified. It seemed to take forever, but finally, as the sun rose on October 28, 1881, a baby's cry pierced the air. "Doctor." Patterson emerged from the bedroom, wiping his hands on a towel, his expression satisfied. "You have a healthy son, Mr. Thorne, and your wife did beautifully." Samuel pushed past him into the bedroom, where Kate lay propped against pillows, holding a tiny bundle wrapped in blankets. She looked exhausted but radiant, her hair damp with sweat, her face glowing with joy. "Come meet your son," she said softly. Samuel approached slowly, his legs unsteady, and looked down at the infant in Kate's arms. The baby was small and red, with a tuft of dark hair and tiny fists that waved in the air. Samuel felt tears prick his eyes, overwhelmed by the reality of this new life, this person who was part of him and Kate. "Can I hold him?" he asked. Kate carefully transferred the baby into Samuel's arms, showing him how to support the head. Samuel held his son with exquisite care, afraid he might break something, and stared down at the small face. The baby's eyes opened briefly, unfocused and dark, and Samuel felt his heart expand to a size he had not known was possible. "What should we name him?" Kate asked. Samuel thought of his father, a good man who had worked hard and loved his family fiercely. "Thomas, after my father," Kate smiled. "Thomas Thorne. It is perfect." Dr. Patterson stayed for a few hours to make sure both Kate and the baby were stable, then departed with Samuel's payment and congratulations. Samuel sent word to the neighbors, and over the next few days, a steady stream of visitors arrived with gifts and well wishes. Martha Henderson brought a basket of food and stayed to help with chores, insisting that Samuel needed to focus on his wife and new son. Those first weeks were a haze of sleepless nights and constant feeding, but Samuel had never been happier. He woke in the night when Thomas cried, brought the baby to Kate for nursing, then sat beside them in the lamplight, watching his son feed with a sense of wonder that never diminished. During the day, he worked the ranch with Thomas strapped to his chest in a sling Kate had made, the baby sleeping against his heartbeat while Samuel fed cattle and mended fences. Kate recovered quickly, her strength returning, and soon she was back to her usual whirlwind of activity, though now with a baby on her hip more often than not. They fell into new rhythms, learning to navigate parenthood together, making mistakes and figuring things out as they went. Thomas was a good baby, generally calm, who seemed content to watch the world with solemn dark eyes. As winter closed in again, their second as a married couple, Samuel reflected on how completely his life had changed. 2 years ago he had been alone, resigned to solitude. Now his house rang with the sounds of family, with Kate's laughter and Thomas's cries and the constant bustle of daily life. The 4 plates sat in the cupboard, waiting for the day when their second child would join them at the table. The years that followed were full and rich. Thomas grew into a sturdy toddler with his father's dark hair and his mother's green eyes, curious about everything and fearless in a way that gave Samuel regular heart palpitations. Kate became pregnant again in 1883, and this time she delivered a daughter in early 1884, a tiny girl with auburn hair and a temperament as fierce as her mother's. They named her Sarah after Kate's mother. With 2 children, the ranch felt complete. Samuel expanded his herd, hired occasional help during busy seasons, and slowly built the operation into something more prosperous. Kate's garden flourished, providing vegetables for their table and extras to sell in town. She became known throughout the community for her preserves and baked goods, and their home became a gathering place for neighbors and friends. Samuel never took any of it for granted. He remembered too clearly the empty house, the solitude, the resignation to a life without love. Every morning when he woke beside Kate, every evening when they sat at the table with their children, he felt grateful in a way that went bone deep. She had chosen him, had bet on a future with a stranger, and in doing so had given him everything he had not known he needed. On their 5th wedding anniversary in September of 1885, Samuel and Kate stood on the porch together after putting the children to bed. The sun was setting over the Sierra Nevada, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. Kate leaned against him and he wrapped his arms around her, resting his chin on top of her head. "You remember the night you came home and found 4 plates on the table?" Kate asked. "I remember thinking I had lost my mind, or that someone was playing an elaborate joke." Kate laughed. "I was so nervous. I kept imagining you throwing me out immediately, calling the sheriff, having me arrested for trespassing. I should have been angrier than I was, but something about it felt right even then, like you belonged here." "I did belong here, I just knew it before you did." Kate turned in his arms to face him. "Thank you for taking a chance on me." Samuel kissed her softly. "Thank you for being brave enough to take a chance on me first." They stood there as darkness fell, wrapped in each other's arms, the sounds of the ranch settling around them. Inside, their children slept safely, the future they had imagined on 4 plates now living and breathing and real. Samuel thought about the words in Kate's journal, about imagining a future and claiming it before it slipped away. She had done exactly that, had reached out and grabbed hold of possibility with both hands, and in doing so had transformed both their lives completely. The years continued to unfold with all the joys and sorrows that came with living. Samuel's ranch prospered, and he earned a reputation as a fair and honest dealer. Kate became a pillar of the community, organizing church socials and helping new families get settled in the area. Thomas grew tall and strong, fascinated by horses like his Uncle James had been. Sarah was brilliant and stubborn, learning to read before she turned 5, devouring every book she could get her hands on. In 1887, Kate became pregnant again, surprising them both. They had thought their family was complete, but the arrival of another son, whom they named Daniel, brought new joy and chaos to the household. Daniel was different from his siblings, quieter and more contemplative, content to sit for hours watching the world around him with thoughtful eyes. Samuel was 41 when Daniel was born, and he sometimes felt the weight of his age, the aches in his back from years of hard work. But Kate kept him young, always pushing forward, always finding new projects and goals. She started raising sheep for wool, taught herself to spin and weave, and soon was producing blankets and clothing that sold well in Carson City. Her energy seemed limitless, and Samuel marveled at how she managed the children, the household, and her various enterprises with apparent ease. The children grew and changed, each developing distinct personalities. Thomas was dutiful and hardworking, following Samuel around the ranch, learning everything about cattle and horses. Sarah was intellectual and curious, constantly asking questions that Samuel had no answer for, reading books on science and history and philosophy that she ordered from catalogs. Daniel was artistic, always drawing or building things, creating elaborate structures from scraps of wood and wire. In 1890, when Thomas was 9 years old, a crisis struck that tested the family in new ways. A particularly harsh winter led to heavy spring flooding, and the creek that bordered Samuel's property overflowed its banks, destroying part of the pasture and washing away several head of cattle. The loss was significant, threatening the ranch's financial stability. Samuel sat at the kitchen table one night, going over the numbers, his heart heavy with worry. Kate came to stand behind him, her hands on his shoulders. "How bad is it?" "Bad enough. We will survive, but it will be a lean year. I might need to take work elsewhere to make up the difference." "No," Kate's voice was firm. "We will figure this out together. Let me look at what we have." Over the next week, Kate assessed every asset they owned, every skill they possessed. She increased production of her textiles, reaching out to merchants in larger towns. She taught Sarah to help with the weaving, turning it into a family enterprise. She negotiated with neighbors to take in their horses for training, capitalizing on Thomas's natural skill with animals. Samuel took on contract work building fences and barns for other ranchers, using his carpentry skills. It was a difficult year, requiring everyone to work harder and sacrifice more. But they weathered it together, and by the following spring, the ranch was stable again. The experience taught them all about resilience, about the importance of pulling together when times were hard. Samuel watched his children rise to the challenge, and he felt fierce pride in the family they had built. As the 1890s progressed, the West was changing. The railroad had come through Nevada, bringing easier access to markets but also more people, more competition. The wild, open spaces that Samuel had loved were slowly being carved up, settled, civilized. He felt a sense of nostalgia for the early days, even as he appreciated the conveniences that progress brought. Thomas, now a teenager, started talking about wanting to see more of the world, to experience places beyond Genoa. Samuel understood the impulse, having wandered himself as a young man, but he also hoped his son would eventually return to take over the ranch. Sarah declared her intention to become a teacher, much to Kate's delight, and began studying with the schoolteacher in town, preparing to take the teaching exam. Daniel remained something of a mystery, content in his own world of creation, building intricate models and drawing detailed sketches of the landscape. In 1895, Samuel and Kate celebrated their 15th anniversary. Their children were now 14, 11, and 8, young people with their own dreams and personalities. Samuel was 47, his hair touched with gray, his body bearing the marks of years of hard labor. Kate was 39, still beautiful, still full of energy, though she moved a bit more slowly than in her youth. They took a trip to Carson City for the occasion, their first time away from the ranch together in years. Martha and Robert Henderson watched the children, and Samuel and Kate spent 3 days in a hotel, walking the city streets, eating in restaurants, acting like the young couple they no longer were. It was wonderful and strange, being alone together again, remembering who they had been before children and responsibilities. On their last evening, they sat in the hotel room and Kate said, "Do you ever regret it? Taking a chance on a crazy woman who broke into your house and set 4 plates on your table?" Samuel pulled her close. "Not for a single second. You gave me a life I never imagined I could have. You gave me love and family and purpose. I would choose you again every time." Kate's eyes glistened with tears. "I knew we would be good together. I knew it the moment I read your letter about James. There was kindness in every word, and I thought, that is a man worth taking a risk for. And I am grateful every day that you took that risk." They made love that night with the tenderness of long familiarity, their bodies knowing each other completely, and Samuel felt the same sense of wonder he had experienced on their wedding night. This woman had chosen him, had built a life with him, had given him everything that mattered. He could not imagine a world without her. The trip home was bittersweet, both of them ready to return to their children but also savoring the last moments of being just Samuel and Kate, without the demands of parenthood. When they arrived back at the ranch, The children rushed out to greet them, full of stories about the week's adventures, and Samuel felt his heart swell with love for this noisy, chaotic, beautiful family. The years continued to roll forward. Thomas apprenticed with a horse trainer in Carson City for a year, then returned home to help Samuel expand the ranch's horse breeding operation. Sarah passed her teaching exam and secured a position at the school in Genoa, boarding in town during the week and returning home on weekends. Daniel discovered a talent for metalworking and began creating decorative pieces that sold in local shops. In 1899, as the century drew to a close, Kate's health began to falter. She developed a persistent cough that would not resolve, and Dr. Patterson, now quite elderly himself, diagnosed her with a lung condition that he could not fully identify. She was ordered to rest, to avoid strenuous work, but Kate being Kate, she ignored the advice more often than not. Samuel watched her with growing fear, seeing her strength slowly ebb, the boundless energy that had defined her beginning to dim. One evening in early spring of 1900, as they sat together on the porch watching the sunset, Kate said, "I want you to promise me something." Samuel's throat tightened. "Anything? If something happens to me, I want you to live, not just survive, but really live. Keep the ranch going, watch our children grow, maybe even find love again if the opportunity arises. Do not lock yourself away like you did before I came. Kate, do not talk like that. You are going to be fine." She gave him a look of patient exasperation. "Samuel Thorne, we made a promise to always be honest with each other. I am not fine, we both know it, so I need to know you will be okay." Samuel felt tears burn his eyes. "I do not know how to be okay without you." "You will learn. You are stronger than you think." Kate took his hand, her grip weaker than it used to be. "I have had a wonderful life with you. I have no regrets. I chose you, and it was the best decision I ever made." "I love you," Samuel said, his voice breaking. "I love you too. Every day, every moment, I have loved you." Kate passed away on April 12, 1900, at the age of 44, with Samuel holding her hand and their children gathered around her bed. The end came peacefully in the early morning hours, and Samuel felt like part of his soul had been ripped away. He had never known pain like this, had never imagined the depth of grief that came with losing someone who had been the center of your world for nearly 20 years. The funeral was attended by what seemed like the entire county. Kate had touched so many lives, had been so integral to the community, that people traveled from miles away to pay their respects. Samuel stood at her graveside, his children beside him, and tried to remember how to breathe. Martha Henderson gripped his arm, her own face wet with tears, and the support of his neighbors was the only thing that kept him standing. The months that followed were the darkest of Samuel's life. He went through the motions of living, caring for the ranch, being present for his children, but inside he felt hollow. The house that had been so full of life now felt empty despite the presence of Thomas, Sarah, and Daniel. Kate's absence was everywhere, in the garden she had tended, in the textiles she had woven, in the laughter that no longer echoed through the rooms. Thomas, now 19 and a man grown, took on more responsibility for the ranch, shouldering burdens so Samuel could grieve. Sarah, 17 and wise beyond her years, kept the household running, cooking and cleaning and caring for her younger brother. Daniel, 13 and heartbroken, threw himself into his art, creating a memorial sculpture for his mother that stood in the garden she had loved. One evening in late summer, Samuel found himself standing at Kate's grave, talking to her as he had taken to doing. "I do not know how to do this without you," he said to the headstone. "You were supposed to be here to see them grow up, to meet our grandchildren, to grow old with me." This was not the plan. But even as he spoke, He heard Kate's voice in his memory, her insistence that he live, that he not withdraw from the world. She had dragged him into life once, and he owed it to her memory to stay there. Slowly, painfully, Samuel began to rebuild. He focused on the ranch, on his children, on the community Kate had loved. He attended church socials again, accepted dinner invitations from neighbors, allowed himself to be part of the world instead of just existing in it. Thomas married in 1902, a rancher's daughter named Emily who had Kate's practical nature and kind heart. Samuel watched his son take his vows and felt both joy and sorrow, wishing Kate could be there to see it. But Emily was a good woman, and she brought new life to the ranch, working alongside Thomas to build their own future. In 1903, she gave birth to a daughter, and when Samuel held his granddaughter for the first time, he felt Kate's presence so strongly it took his breath away. "Her name is Catherine," Thomas said, watching his father with the baby. "After mother." Samuel looked down at the infant, at the green eyes that were pure Kate, and felt tears stream down his face. She would have been so proud. Sarah continued teaching and eventually married the town's new doctor, a young man named Peter Carlson, who had come to Genoa after old Dr. Patterson finally retired. They settled in town, and Sarah balanced her teaching career with raising a family, having 3 children in quick succession. Daniel took over the metalworking full-time, opening a shop in Carson City that gained a reputation for quality craftsmanship. He remained unmarried, content with his work and his independence. As the years passed, Samuel aged but did not withdraw. He kept Kate's promise, living fully, engaging with the world. He became a grandfather to 8 children, spoiling them with stories and candy and patient attention. He expanded the ranch again, turning it into one of the most successful operations in the region. And he kept Kate's garden thriving, tending it himself, making sure the flowers she had loved continued to bloom year after year. In 1915, at the age of 67, Samuel sat on the porch of the house that had once been so empty. Thomas and his family lived in a new house on the property, and the sounds of children playing drifted across the yard. Sarah visited every Sunday with her brood, and Daniel stopped by frequently between trips to Carson City. The ranch was thriving, the family was strong, and Samuel had lived the life Kate had insisted he live. He thought about that first night, coming home to 4 plates on the table, finding a woman who had decided they would build a life together. It had seemed insane at the time, impossible, but Kate had made it real through sheer force of will and unwavering belief. She had given him love and family and purpose, had transformed him from a man resigned to solitude into someone who understood the value of connection and community. Samuel pulled out the journal Kate had left on that first night, the one where she had written about her decision to claim him as her husband. He read her words, as he did often, feeling her presence in every line. And then he pulled out his own journal, the one he had started keeping after she died, and he wrote, "It has been 15 years since you left, Kate, and I still miss you every day, but I have kept my promise. I have lived. I have watched our children grow into remarkable people, have held grandchildren you never met, but who carry pieces of you in their eyes and smiles and fierce determination. The ranch prospers. The community you loved continues to thrive. And the 4 plates you set on that table have been filled with more love and life than I ever imagined possible. You were right to choose me, Kate Ashford Thorne, and I am grateful every day that you did. You taught me that love is not something that happens to you, but something you choose, something you build with intention and courage. Thank you for choosing me. Thank you for building this life with me. I will love you until my last breath, and whatever comes after." Samuel lived to be 73, passing away peacefully in his sleep in the spring of 1921. His children buried him beside Kate, reuniting them in death as they had been in life. At his funeral, Thomas spoke about the legacy his parents had built, about the love that had started with 4 plates on a table and grown into something that shaped generations. Sarah read from her mother's journal, sharing Kate's fierce determination and unwavering belief in the power of choice. And Daniel unveiled a sculpture he had created, a bronze piece showing a man and woman standing together, looking toward the horizon, their hands intertwined. It stood at the entrance to the ranch, a monument to a love that had transformed everything it touched. The ranch remained in the family for generations, passed down from parent to child, each one adding their own story to the legacy. And in the family home, in a place of honor on the mantel, sat 4 white porcelain plates, carefully preserved, a reminder of the day Kate Ashford decided her future and changed the course of 2 lives forever. They became a symbol in the family, representing courage and choice and the power of believing in love even when it seems impossible. And every generation heard the story of how their great-great-grandmother broke into a house, set 4 plates on a table, and claimed a future that did not yet exist, but became more real and beautiful than anyone could have imagined.